headquarters. As to the delay, that could easily be guaranteed. There were causeways on the Shell Road, which a single battery could hold against a large force, and the plantations were everywhere so intersected by hedges and dikes that they seemed expressly planned for defence. Although creeks wound in and out everywhere, yet these were only navigable at high tide, and at all times were impassable marshes. There were but a few posts where the enemy were within rifle range, and their occasional attacks at those points were soon stopped by our enforcement of a pithy order from General Hunter: "Give them as good as they send." So that, with every opportunity for being kept on the alert, there was small prospect of serious danger, and all promised an easy life, with only enough of care to make it pleasant. The picket station was therefore always a coveted post among the regiments, combining some undeniable importance with a kind of relaxation, and as we were there 3 months on our first tour of duty, and returned there several times afterwards, we got well acquainted with it. The whole region always reminded me of the descriptions of Leven's, and I always expected to meet Henry Laroche Jacqueline riding in the woods. How can I ever describe the charm and picturesqueness of that summer life? Our house possessed 4 spacious rooms and a piazza. Around it were grouped sheds and tents. The camp was a little way off on one side, the negro quarters of the plantation on the other, and all was immersed in a dense mass of waving and murmuring locust blossoms. The spring days were always lovely, while the evenings were always conveniently damp, so that we never shut the windows by day, nor omitted our cheerful fire by night. Indoors, the main headquarters seemed like a camp of some party of young engineers in time of peace, only with a little female society added, and a good many martial associations thrown in. A large, low, dilapidated room, with an immense fireplace, and with window panes chiefly broken, so that the sashes were still open even when closed, such was our home. The walls were scratched with capital charcoal sketches by R. of the 4th New Hampshire, and with a good map of the island and its wood paths by C. of the 1st Massachusetts Cavalry. The room had the picturesqueness which comes everywhere from the natural grouping of articles of daily use: swords, belts, pistols, rifles, field glasses, spurs, canteens, gauntlets, while wreaths of grey moss above the windows, and a pelican's wing 3 feet long over the high mantelpiece, indicated more deliberate decoration. This and the whole atmosphere of the place spoke of the refining presence of agreeable women, and it was pleasant when they held their little court in the evening, and pleasant all day with the different visitors who were always streaming in and out: officers and soldiers on various business, turbaned women from the plantations, coming with complaints or questionings, fugitives from the mainland to be interrogated, visitors riding up on horseback, their hands full of jasmine and wild roses, and the sweet sunny air all perfumed with magnolias and the southern pine. From the neighboring camp there was a perpetual low hum. Louder voices and laughter re-echoed amid the sharp sounds of the axe from the pine woods, and sometimes, when the relieved pickets were discharging their pieces, there came the hollow sound of dropping rifle shots, as in skirmishing, perhaps the most unmistakable and fascinating association that war bequeaths to the memory of the ear. Our domestic arrangements were of the oddest description. From the time when we began housekeeping, by taking down the front door to complete herewith a little office for the surgeon on the piazza, everything seemed upside down. I slept on a shelf in the corner of the parlor, bequeathed me by Major F., my jovial predecessor, and, if I waked at any time, could put my head through the broken window, arouse my orderly, and ride off to see if I could catch a picket asleep. We used to spell the word Picquet, because that was understood to be the correct thing, in that department at least, and they used to say at the post headquarters that as soon as the officer in command of the outpost grew negligent, and was guilty of a K, he was ordered in immediately. Then the arrangements for the ablution were peculiar. We fitted up a bathing place in a brook, which somehow got appropriated at once by the company laundresses, but I had my revenge, for I took to bathing in the family wash-tub. After all, however, the kitchen department had their advantage, for they used my solitary napkin to wipe the mess table. As for food, we found it impossible to get chickens, save in the immature shape of eggs. Fresh pork was prohibited by the surgeon, and other fresh meat came rarely. We could indeed hunt for wild turkeys, and even deer, but such hunting was found only to increase the appetite without corresponding supply. Still we had our luxuries, large delicious drumfish and alligator steaks, like a more substantial fried halibut, which might have afforded the theme for Charles Lamb's dissertation on roast pig, and by whose aid, for the first time in our lives, we tasted crackling. The post bakery yielded admirable bread, and for vegetables and fruit we had a very poor sweet potatoes, and, in their season, an unlimited supply of the largest blackberries. For beverage we had the vapid milk of that region, in which, if you let it stand, the water sinks instead of the cream rising, and the delicious sugar cane syrup, which we had brought from Florida, and which we drank at all hours. Old Floridorians say that no one is justified in drinking whiskey while he can get cane juice. It is sweet and spirited, without cloying, foams like ale, and there were little spots on the ceiling of the dining-room where our lively beverage had popped out its cork. We kept it in a whiskey bottle, and as whiskey itself was absolutely prohibited among us, it was amusing to see the surprise of our military visitors when this innocent substitute was brought in. They usually liked it in the end, but, like the old Frenchwoman over a glass of water, wished that it were a sin to give it a relish. As the foaming beakers of molasses and water were handed round, the guests would make with them the courteous little gestures of polite imbibing, and would then quaff the beverage, some with gusto, others with the slight afterlook of dismay. But it was a delicious and cooling drink while it lasted, and, at all events, was the best and the worst we had. We used to have reveille at 6, and breakfast about 7. Then the mounted couriers began to arrive from a dozen different locations, with written reports of what had happened during the night. A boat seen, a picket fired upon, a battery erecting. These must be consolidated and forwarded to the headquarters, with the daily report of the command. So many sick, so many detached service, and all the rest. This was our morning newspaper, our Herald and Tribune. I never got tired of it. Then the couriers must be furnished with countersign and instructions, and sent off again. Then we scattered to our various rides, all disguised as duty, one to inspect the pickets, one to visit a sick soldier, one to build a bridge or clear a road, and still another to headquarters for ammunition or commissary stores. Galloping through green lanes, miles of triumphal arches of wild roses, roses pale and large and fragrant, mingled with great boughs of the white cornel, fantastic masses of showy surprises. Such were our rides, ranging from 8 to 15 and even 20 miles. Back to a late dinner with our various experiences, and perhaps specimens to match. A thunder snake 8 feet long, a live opossum, with a young clinging to a natural pouch, an armful of great white scentless pond lilies. After dinner to the tangled garden for the rosebuds or early magnolias, whose cloying fragrance will always bring back to me the full zest of those summer days. Then dress parade, and a little drill as the day grew cool. In the evening, tea, and then the piazza or the fireside, as the case might be, chess, cards, perhaps a little music by aid of the assistant surgeon's melodeon, a few pages of Jean Paul's Titan, almost my only book, and carefully husbanded, perhaps a mail with its infinite felicities. Such was our day. Night brought its own fascinations, more solitary and profound. The darker they were, the more clearly it was our duty to visit the pickets. The paths that had grown so familiar by day seemed a wholly new labyrinth by night, and every added shade of darkness seemed to shift and complicate them all anew, till at last man's skill grew utterly baffled, and the clue must be left to the instinct of the horse. Riding beneath the solemn starlight, or by soft grey mist, or densest blackness, the frogs croaking, the strange chuckwat's widow droning his ominous note above my head, the mocking-bird dreaming in music, the great southern fireflies rising to the tree-tops, or hovering close to the ground like glow-worms, till the horse raised his hoofs to avoid them, then pine-woods and cypress swamps, or past sullen brooks, or white tents, or the dimly seen huts of sleeping negroes, down to the glimmering shore, where black statues leaned against trees or stood alert in the pathways. Never, in all the days of my life, shall I forget the magic of those haunted nights. We had nocturnal boat service, too, for it was a part of our instructions to obtain all possible information about